Thank you for viewing this RFID Community Connect video from AIM. AIM is an industry association for automatic identification technologies. It's not only RFID, but barcoding, IoT, or any other technologies that automatically identify and capture data. If you want to learn more about AIM, go to aimglobal.org or reach out to us to set up a one-on-one call where we can tell you a little bit more about how AIM can benefit your business.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys all about security and RFID today, and it's more going to focus on not necessarily device security. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we're going to talk about use cases and applications where we're seeing a bigger need for security. So, but first, I want to just give you an overview as to how we think about RFID at Zebra. In the industry, we believe that there are three different types of reading. The first one is what most people are familiar with today. We call it presence reading. And that's really where just a reader sees a tag, right? And it knows it's there. No context to the read. Maybe the software in the back end can provide context, but there's no real context to it. It's just that a reader saw a tag, and basically it's used to quote unquote count my stuff, right? What we're seeing is that people want to start adding context and value to RFID reads. And where we're seeing that is two more points. The first one we call is control points. And so that's anywhere where an RFID tag is read that you can add context to it. And so that's either like at a point of sale or a transition. It could be back of store to front of store. It could be a front of store to an exit. It could be from a warehouse to a truck in a shipping facility. And so that type of read adds context, and it's not just I saw this stuff, but it's what's happening to the stuff, right? Is the stuff moving from the dock to the truck? Is the stuff moving from the truck to the dock? And that helps to add a little bit more context to the read and provide more value. And then ultimately, we see customers moving towards along their journey an automated sensing network of readers that basically says not only how many things do I have or what's happening to my stuff, but where is my stuff? How can I locate it? A kind of eye in the sky type of view. And so that's kind of how we think about RFID at Zebra. And just to show you, and I'm not a sales guy, this is not a sales pitch, but you can see all the different types of devices that we offer today that support those three different thought processes or thought columns within Zebra and the RFID reading. All right, I'm going to start to dive a little bit into the technical security aspect from a product standpoint, and then we'll talk about some more use cases. The first one that I always get asked about is operating system, and operating system security has quietly become one of the biggest risks in enterprise devices today, and it's really impacting organizations on three fronts. First, breaches are truly expensive. More than half of security breaches could have been prevented with available patches. And many times enterprise devices remain unpatched or stuck on aging operating systems. And the result really isn't just a financial loss, but it's really operational disruption, reputational damage to the brand, and increased compliance exposure from authorities. And even more concerning, many breaches go undetected for months, which is just, I can't even fathom how that happens. Second, the total cost of ownership is increasing, and enterprise devices, they're lasting longer than the traditional 3-year software support lifecycle. And so while the hardware may still perform perfectly well in the environment, the operating system really isn't being updated or secured. And that leaves devices, corporate data, and the networks that they connect to increasingly vulnerable over time. Third, OS transitions themselves are more challenging. And specifically when we talk about Android, moving from one Android version to another is rarely seamless in these enterprise environments. APIs change, security functionality changes, and there are compatibility concerns with line of business applications, testing cycles, retraining requirements for associates, and even potential downtime that can directly impact productivity on ROI. And so when customers evaluate enterprise solutions today, they're not just buying hardware performance anymore. They're buying long-term security support, lifecycle stability, and confidence really that their devices can evolve without disrupting operations. And that's where something that Zebra's really put a lot of effort into comes into play. And this is called LifeGuard, and we directly address those challenges with this capability. And LifeGuard extends, when we specifically talk about Android, it extends the Android security and patch support for up to 10 years to help ensure that customers' investments on the devices are really met. And it gives IT teams flexibility in how updates are deployed, whether it's fully automated, tightly controlled, or even manual based on, different operational needs. Equally more important, Lifeguard reduces disruption, and customers really get up to a full year to migrate to a new Android version. We're not forcing anybody, to migrate to new Android versions and disrupt, line of business activity. And then we also provide the ability to do silent background updates with packaging that really makes it less intrusive. And the result there really is stronger security, lower operational risk, and more manageable long-term strategy. So that's really how Lifeguard delivers stronger security. But I want to talk about something that's even more fundamental. And while Lifeguard is essential for keeping Android devices secure, our commitment really to security begins much earlier. It really begins at the stage of design and engineering, and it's really driven not only by our own standards, which admittedly are quite high, but also by mandatory government regulations. And so one of the most significant of these regulations, and I think most recent biggest impact to the way we look at device security is the EU's Radio Equipment Directive, or you might have heard it called EU Red, which sets a critical baseline for security that we must meet to sell our products in Europe. And so, if we take a closer look at what that means for us, this is a mandatory EU regulation that governs the safety, health, and cybersecurity of all internet-connected radio equipment devices sold in the EU. So it doesn't matter what type of radio it has. If it has a radio, it's subject to EU Red, and that's inclusive of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and other types of radio devices. And it's enforced throughout the entire European Union to protect user privacy and ensure devices don't harm the network that they're connected to. And complying with Red is critical for us and other device manufacturers, and you all as well, as it allows us to place that CE mark on our products for sale in the EU market. So all devices sold into the EU market after August 1st of last year, 2025, must be EU Red compliant. And to ensure that our devices are compliant with the EU Red directive, we are rolling out several key security enhancements. At a high level, we're strengthening access control across the board. This really includes password protecting Wi-Fi and IoT configurations, requiring a default password change upon first use. Many of you are familiar with that on our fixed reader products, and securing firmware updates to prevent unauthorized changes. But we're also boosting device security with features like user authorization mode for Bluetooth pairing, automatic session timeouts for administrators, and brute force protection to block suspicious login attempts. And so all of these measures are designed to meet the directive's stringent cybersecurity requirements and to help ensure that your devices are more secure and better than ever before. And so Zebra really focuses on security, and I've seen that firsthand, over my 10 years here. And I think it's becoming even more and more of a focus for us in, upfront in how we design our products. So now more into the fun stuff for me. I love talking about use cases because I think this is more real world. And so one of the things I want to talk about is a use case for security in retail. And many of you have been, for a long time now, talking about cycle counting in retail. And every customer, I'll say pretty confidently, starts their journey in cycle counting, right? Their RFID journey is in cycle counting. It's the easiest ROI to show for RFID implementations in retail. But what we're really seeing now is a transition or an expansion of RFID in retail to include use cases like loss detection. So traditional EAS solutions, in retail are being phased out, and we're looking now at loss detection. And really what loss detection is it's not necessarily alarming at the exit. Nobody's chasing people, or I'd say very few retailers have security guards chasing people out the door and tackling them, right, and trying to get the merchandise back. It's really now about understanding what's gone out the door. And so that RFID read is very key to understand what's gone out the door that hasn't been paid for. So now it's not on the shelf. Now I can replenish it and put it back on the shelf. And we are developing products, to do that. Our ATR 7000 is perfect for directionality. But loss detection is really not effective unless you're reading at the point of sale. And so these next two steps in the RFID journey for our customers, together provide a really good security and replenishment solution. And so whether it's it doesn't matter the form factor that you're using, whether it's a handheld scanner or a bin, a self checkout, or a multi-plane scanner, what have you. Tying an RFID read or lack thereof to an exit read helps to improve security and on-shelf replenishment and on-shelf inventory availability. Moving on to more industrial stuff, we're seeing a lot of movement in the port and yard management verticals. We're seeing some more movement, as you saw from Brian previously, in T&L. A lot of T&L customers really moving on RFID, and also waste management, which is an up-and-coming vertical for us as well. And some of the use cases we're seeing there is vehicle and people access control using UHF RFID for vehicle access control, for no-go zone enforcement. So if certain material or certain people don't have access to certain zones in a facility, we're seeing UHF RFID being used for alarming or preventing access to certain areas. Also, tool access and usage. Like, let's say I have a forklift and I don't have a forklift license. We've seen customers looking to implement RFID solutions to restrict access to certain tools based on employment status or capability. Over the road, our RTI can't tell you how many inquiries we get at our logistics shows like Modex and ProMat about how do I track my RFID goods outside of the four walls. And so, with a GPS-enabled solution, you can track RFID over the road along with 5G. So that's a really big one. RTI tracking, plastic totes, plastic pallets. Customers have a lot of issues with loss in those areas, and that again is a security issue. It's not your traditional security, but it's financial security, right? We're losing tens of millions of dollars in plastic pallets. That's going to have an impact on our bottom line. Moving over to even more industrial areas, we're seeing a lot of inquiries from both military, police, fire, and EMS supply. And so I wanted to touch on this a little bit. Whether it's armory tracking, tracking weapons going in and out of an armory, munitions or tactical supply. We've seen governments all across the world and militaries all across the world implement these types of use cases using UHF RFID. We've seen militaries implement it for loadout tracking, essential loadout tracking and validation, make sure that infantry and other types of troops have everything they need in their rucksacks and in their vehicles before they leave for an operation. MRO operations, we're seeing customers come inbound about repair inventories, maintenance scheduling, and all that kind of stuff using UHF RFID, as well as again vehicle and people access control. So a lot of up and coming use cases that are related to security.